Alright everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. We are going to be breaking down the Hall of Fame game, giving you guys the top picks and plays and best lineup process for this game. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So we are going to go ahead and start off with a game preview here, guys. So just starting out with the betting odds for this game. So just looking at it, it is a game in which has a game total of about 32.5. Okay, in some spots, in some other spots is about 31.5. Okay, typically speaking, this is a game where we can see teams get over this line, but I would say that's correct. So basically for DFS purposes, especially showdown slate purposes, what we are probably looking at is sadly, we're probably going to be looking at some DSTs to play in this game due to the low game total that we have. Now, for what's worth, it is worth calling out with the game total, kind of historically what the lines have done. So over the last 3 Hall of Fame games, the overs have all hit. Prior to that, there was some weather situations going on in there and really just not great players playing it. The under had hit 4 straight time. Well, really, look at that. The under had hit a bunch prior to the last 3 games. So definitely interesting there in that regard. But at the very least, I think what this is showing us is we probably are going to be looking at closer to around, let's just say 35 points rather than the line that we currently have. So guys, in regards to preseason NFL DFS, we know that playing time is very much key here. And with that, we are looking at which players are not going to be active some of the times to figure out what the playing time is going to be. Now, we do know what the playing time is going to look like for quarterback Trey Lance and then also his backup in this game, DJ, as well. So Trey Lance is going to be scheduled to play a full first half, okay, and then he's going to play 1 drive into the third quarter, okay? So he is a quarterback that we know is going to get a lot of playing time, which is really obviously going to be huge. He is probably going to be the most owned player on the slate, and then I would assume the DSTs are going to be the second most owned players on the slate. I would say, given the fact that we're getting Trey Lance, it would be Trey Lance most owned, and then Chargers DST, and then from there, probably Detroit DST. Obviously, you wouldn't want to stack Trey Lance with Detroit DST too much, but still, given the amount of playing time that we're going to get for him, especially for a rushing quarterback, that is pretty darn huge. And in regards to that, that's basically how the slates have gone for those Hall of Fame games, where you do want to be targeting probably the 2 DSTs, but there has been kind of a captain quarterback that we should be rolling with. Last year, Brett Rippon was someone that was expected to get a lot of work. He ended up doing that, ended up connecting with receiver Colin Johnson a little bit. You looked at the Browns quarterback 2 years ago, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who really had his breakout, if you will, which vaulted him to start for the Browns later on that season. Very awesome game for him. He ended up starting, and then you look at Jarrett Stidham. I actually think this is a pretty comparable player for Trey Lance, a player that maybe not the best thrower, right? We know that, but is a player that could end up rushing a decent amount, which should raise his floor a decent amount there as well. But I do want to have maybe a little bit of caution with that because Trey Lance is the quarterback that we do know that we want to be going out of our way to target, right? We do know that. But if we look at some of the preseason data that's available on 9to5sports.com, the Chargers actually had the third most pass attempts, or have had the third most pass attempts for teams under Jim Harbaugh. So what we're looking at here, guys, I put together this data, which is going to be available for all 9to5 site members. What we're looking at is trying to find tendencies from NFL head coaches. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here through their time being NFL head coaches. So new head coaches are not going to be a part of that, but it does give us a very good sense of how we are able to predict good plays each and every year, guys. That's, I've been a preseason NFL DFS OG. I'm the first content creator that started covering preseason NFL DFS. I think a lot of people would consider me probably the best at this, at least segment of the NFL DFS. I love covering it. And part of the reason as to why we've had a lot of success is kind of looking at those tendencies there. So when we're looking at the Chargers, the issue that we're going to see with them is that they do not rush the football a lot, which is kind of contradicts a little bit of what we were expecting last year. Okay, where throughout the season, they end up rushing a decent amount, don't get me wrong, but they end up throwing the ball a decent amount. Now, that was a little bit due to some quarterback competitions going for the backup there with Easton Stick. Obviously, he's no longer there, but we have seen a tendency for Easton Stick to at least be a workhorse quarterback. We saw that last year, a decent amount there. And that ends up being pretty huge. It might sound weird for me to say a workhorse quarterback. Some teams will give us workhorse running backs. We'll touch on that as well. But we did get a workhorse quarterback from the Chargers. So, again, it is most likely going to be Trey Lance. The issue, though, is that we might not be getting as much rushing upside, and that's part of the equation as well. They're probably going to be trying to get him to throw the football more. Okay, so clearly the best play on the board. Okay, probably spent a little bit too much time on that. And if we look at the 9to5 lineup builder, he is going to be the top projected fantasy point scorer. Now, most of what is going into this, just as an FYI, is being pulled in from a site like Prize Picks, which is giving us all these various lines, guys. And so if someone like Vaki, who we'll touch on in just a second, is questionable and ends up sitting, then obviously he is someone that you would not want included in that lineup builder. Someone you'd want to zero out there, which is something you can do inside the tool. But yes, what we're going to notice is the sites are really liking Trey Lance a bunch and not liking DJ that much at all, right? Because he's not going to play a full half. You don't really know how long that first drive in the third quarter is going to go. That being said, maybe Trey Lance gets a little bit banged up early on in the game and you can gain some massive leverage by just playing him and not Trey Lance. Could be something that you end up doing. Now, something that I do think is worth calling out here when we are looking at like Prize Picks and Underdog, the prop bets that we are somewhat using to pull in those projections for NFL DFS, we're not getting any receiving prop bets. Now, that's not to say that we aren't getting any receivers that we can be on for the Chargers. And so let's just touch on those. So what we do know with the Chargers is that Ladd McConkey is not going to play. We also know that Quentin Johnston is not going to play as well. Jalen Reagor is someone that is a little bit banged up. He is a veteran as well. We'll see if he ends up playing. Okay, guys, did not practice on Monday. My typical assumption is if a player is banged up, they're typically not going to play, especially in this game. Okay, so with that, we do know that the rookies are all going to play. So Trey Harris is going to play. Just how much will he play is the question. I would imagine probably a few series, I would say for him, and then also Hampton, who is going to be playing. I would assume that Hampton's going to play a max of like 20 plays. It could just depend on the game flow of the game. That's always a big thing with preseason NFL DFS, where someone might be scheduled to get 3 series. Those could all be all 3 and outs where they only get 9 plays, or they could be long sustained drives as well. That's just part of it. But that being said, I don't know if we necessarily need to target those players too much. We can have a little bit of exposure to them, but we don't want to go crazy with it. The player that I'm getting my most exposure to is Keandre Lambert-Smith, who has been getting a bunch of training camp hype. A lot of the news coming out for him has been that he looks a little bit like Mike Williams, the former LA Chargers receiver that has since retired. Now, I will say when I'm watching these clips that are being posted on Twitter, I'm not exactly all too encouraged. Like, he looks like Mike Williams, which in this regard, I don't know if I would necessarily consider that a good thing simply because he's not getting open. He's making good place adjustments on the ball, but he is always covered. In other words, he's got a little bit of that Keon Coleman in him as well. But for preseason NFL DFS purposes, I do like that. And if you look at kind of the training camp videos and the hype, the connection has been Trey Lance and Dre's, who they're calling him, at least Chargers, actually calling him Dre. So Lambert-Smith is going to be someone I do like with stacks for Trey Lance. And another receiver that we do know is going to be playing is going to be Darius Davis as well, who if he ends up playing, he's actually not a terrible option as well. The issue with him is how much is he going to play again? I think for receiver purposes, we are probably looking at him maybe being the receiver number 5 for this team, maybe 4, but he is someone that is pretty decent. He is battling for a position, so can we assume he's going to play a half? I don't know if I would go that far, but he is someone that, part of the Trey Lance equation is we want to be playing Davis, we want to play Lambert-Smith, and probably a little bit of Harris there as well. Those are all fine options. Then from there, we do have some interesting clicks, like Des Fitzpatrick is someone that has popped up as a decent click for preseason DFS purposes, so maybe someone we're looking at. And then Brendan Rice as well. Not too much hope. He did get a little bit of hype last year, but he's someone that would probably be playing more in the fourth quarter, so probably someone you're playing a little bit there with DJ instead. Now, in regards to the running backs, let's just talk about them real quick. And I'm just going to show you guys using the R-Lands depth chart. I kind of like their data a little bit more. It's typically more up-to-date just as an FYI. So we're not expecting Hampton to play too much. We already know that. Okay, so with that, Harris is already out. We know that as well. Vidal is someone that was getting a lot of hype last year at this time, although his talent really didn't match it. You have 3 other similar running backs to him and Jared Patterson, Hassan Haskins as well. I don't necessarily see that. I would assume that these reps are all going to split up amongst those players. And then you also have 2 other players that they have brought in as well. I don't think we're worried about Nyheim Hines too much, but Sanders there is someone that I would expect to get a little bit of run as well. And again, if we just take a peek at kind of the lineup builder, the players that we are seeing are decent options are mostly with the Detroit running backs, which actually does fit the scheme of Detroit as well in regards to them rushing the football. Now, before we get into that, we do need to talk about the kickers. As I'm recording this, I do not believe they have backup kickers. I'm pretty sure it's just Cameron Dicker and Jake Bates are going to be the kickers. And I say it that way because It's not too shocking to see these teams even just try out a secondary kicker in these games, but I haven't seen anything report on that. If you guys have, let me know in the comment section below, because again, this is the Hall of Fame game. It won't be too shocking to see them maybe get another kicker some reps. But as it sits right now, if those two players are going to be in this game and active, even with that low point total, we probably should be looking at them. Again, just looking at the prize picks props, what we're going to notice is they're both set at 1.5 field goals made, as well as their PATs. And so let's just say they get 1.5, right? They're not going to do that, but 1.5 points right there. That's actually pretty huge for this game. Let's just say they make one field goal. That's at least 4.5 points right there. That ends up becoming pretty darn appealing for us for preseason NFL DFS purposes. Now, from there, let's go ahead and get into the Detroit Lions in regards to kind of their preseason tendencies under Dan Campbell. Now, I do want to make that clear distinction. It is under Dan Campbell. We know that obviously Ben Johnson is now with the Chicago Bears. So we'll see if it's been a Dan Campbell thing or Ben Johnson thing. Typically speaking, it is a head coaching thing. They just want their starters not to play that much. They want to get looks at certain backups, and that's up to the offensive coordinator to do that there as well. Being a former college football coach, that's kind of what we ended up doing as well throughout camp, especially when we scrimmage another team. Or me being a position coach, I was like, all right, we need to give this certain receiver a quick look. Let's get him, a few plays. But ultimately, it is up to the head coach and then the offensive coordinator and then the position coach. So just as an FYI there. What we are going to see here, though, is that Dan Campbell does have a tendency to rush the football a bunch. Okay, he actually was one of the leaders there. And we have seen Jamar Jefferson be a pretty darn big workhorse running back. That has actually been true in other regards as well for some other running backs. Okay. It's typically not someone that's going to play starters. The defense doesn't give up a lot of points, which is a little bit concerning. But what's also concerning is that the offense doesn't really score as well. So now let's go ahead and jump into the Detroit Lions and their quarterback situation. So Hendon Hooker is an interesting play just in the sense that he is someone that can rush the football a decent amount. Now, he is someone that did end up getting injured in the preseason last year because of that. He was tearing it up and lowers his head, and I forget if it was a concussion or whatever, but I remember him getting injured and it being very tilting. It's like, just slide, buddy. What are you doing? But what's interesting about this play is if he truly is their QB number 2, does it really make sense to give him a lot of looks? Because it's a battle between him and Kyle Allen, and this being the Hall of Fame game, will they actually want to get Hendon Hooker a lot of work in this game specifically, where it is going to be sloppy? There is going to be a lot of backups in the game. That's especially coming in off of a preseason where he got injured last year. Now, it could be a flip side thing where they know he's not going to get any looks throughout the season, so they want to develop him more, whereas Kyle Allen is already a pretty established player. That's my long way of saying that. It wouldn't be shocking to see one of those two players get more reps than what we are currently expecting. Now, when we look at the preseason data that's being pulled in right now, we are seeing that is basically split right now. Okay, Hooker 99.5 passing yards, Kyle Allen 94.5. Okay, so it is right in the middle. If Kyle Allen's going against backups, I'm a little bit more inclined to get to Kyle Allen than I am Hooker, but Hooker, again, does rush the football a decent amount. So it is a balancing act there. And then for what it's worth, when we go ahead and take a peek at the Detroit Lions in terms of the players that we are getting prop bets for, again, it's worth calling out that we are getting a lot of rushing prop bets for the Lions. So we're getting Jabari Small, we're getting Vaki, who again is questionable, and then we're getting Kai here as well, recently signed for them. All at decently high rush totals. Now, we do tend to see Dan Campbell have more of a workhorse running back. I do think we probably want to begin some sort of exposure to the Lions running back room, especially more so than the Chargers. Now, the issue that we have with the Lions is, although we can pretty much accurately predict, Jared Goff's not going to play. We know that the starters are not going to play for the Lions, just as an FYI. So that means Gibbs is out, David Montgomery's out, and I would imagine that means Craig Reynolds is not going to play. So that does leave us with 4 running backs to pull from for the Detroit Lions, but at the same time, that does leave us with 4 running backs to pull from the Detroit Lions. So if Vaki ends up saying, that ends up being pretty darn huge. Now, they did just recently sign Jacob Sailors, who I believe it was the UFL or whatever it's called now, maybe Canadian Football League. Anyways, he was kind of a standout in one of those leagues. We know that doesn't typically transfer. So you do have Jabari Small and then Kai as well. Kai is probably the one I like the most. The issue that I have with him is he hasn't really been getting any hype. Okay, there's zero hype for him. There's zero hype for Jabari Small. Now, again, it is worth calling out that I do think it makes logical sense for him to potentially be the workhorse running back. Okay. Vaki could sit, and they just did sign that Sailors running back as well on Monday. So that's I mean, it's a Hall of Fame game. That doesn't ultimately matter too much, but like he fits the mold of someone that they would give workhorse reps to. Maybe it's small, but I think this would be the top priority play for running back for the Lions. So guys, now we need to jump into the receivers. And the one that I like the most just from a talent perspective is going to be Isaac Tesla. If you look at his RAS score, it was off the charts. He is someone that if you watch the film on him throughout the college football, you'd be like, how is this guy not more productive? How is he not a higher draft pick? And I would assume it has to do with the separation. But he is someone that, has been making plays like that throughout training camp. And again, he just tests out well. He's someone that does make sense to get a decent amount of work here in this game as well. So he's going to be a player that I want the most receiver-wise. Now, that being said, we do have the former Georgia receiver as well, Dominic Lovett as well, which big body receiver could do something like you play at Georgia, you're going to be playing in the Hall of Fame game. I don't hate that. He's not someone that has been standing out in camp, though. And on top of that, you do have a lot of players like Donovan Peoples-Jones there. You have Tom Kennedy, one of the preseason GOATs, if you will, Tom Kennedy, who just always seems to produce there. He's someone that's probably going to be active in this game. I doubt that like Tim Patrick or Khalif Raymond are going to be active in this game. So that's why I'm mostly going to Tesla there. But even like Ronnie Bell is playing in this game. Like, he's a talented player, especially going against backups. Like, that becomes intriguing as well. But to me, again, it makes sense to get Tesla looks. That's why I'm going to be targeting him the most. So let's go ahead and get into kind of the lineup process for this. Again, I kind of talked about some stacks that I'm going to be running out for this slate. That just as an FYI, I do hope to have a feature in the 9-to-5 lineup builder for this slate. Maybe I'll have it up by then where we can tell to do a specific stack, so again, for example, like Hendon Hooker potentially with Isaac Tesla, or you go with Trey Lance maybe stacked with Lambert Smith there. Like, that's something I want to do. But I'm not going to give you guys the optimal lineup. I mean, that's pretty darn easy to see. We're going to try to get a little bit unique here. So we'll put Trey Lance in the captain spot. Like, okay, maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we want to try to get lucky with his receiver. We'll go with Lambert Smith, but we already know we're going to be playing Trey Lance, right? He is the top play on the board. We already know that. Now, if we're going with that stack, we are going to be playing Chargers DST and probably Cameron Dicker already. Okay, so that being said, do we want to get to Detroit at all? Their DST? Maybe not. Maybe we fade that if we're going pretty darn heavy with these players. Now, I don't mind the idea of going again with a running back for Detroit, even with the Chargers DST. Like, the thought process is Detroit is going to continue to rush the football a bunch. That's going to keep the clock running. And for a Hall of Fame game, if we can just get some raw points from the Chargers DST, that's going to be pretty darn good for us. So we'll do that. And then, it really doesn't matter from this point. I'm just trying to give a little bit of a unique lineup that we could put out there. Hooker is someone that is going to rush the football probably. And so with that, if he ends up playing a full half, then we can feel pretty good about that there. But again, Kyle Allen, don't mind in the second half. There are some unique things that you can do to, twist your lineups to make it unique. But I've mentioned what the optimal approach is going to be. If you guys are someone that's a 9-to-5 member using the 9-to-5 lineup builder, you guys will see the optimal lineup. It's pretty darn simple there. Now, I mentioned the 9-to-5 lineup builder. The 9-to-5 membership, guys, is going to be available for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Including that is going to be all the NFL tools, all the prop tools for Prize Picks and Underdog as well, and then all the fantasy golf tools as well. Again, it's priced at $10 a month. Best value out there, really by far, guys. Take advantage of that. Thank you for watching, though. That's going to do it for this video. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We are going to be covering a lot of preseason NFL DFS throughout this preseason. Then we're going to be breaking down the NFL season as well. So I appreciate you guys being here. Good luck with all your lineups. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel as well. Thanks for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.